Boom. Okay, so I wanted to briefly explain my perspective and opinion on violence in hip hop. And essentially, the way I look at it is this: I've seen the artists that make violent music, and I've seen people who are violent make music, if you understand what that means. So there's a difference between perpetuating violence and depicting violence. And both are necessary, but both can be abused. And so, what that means to me, as I've learned it over the years of being a, I guess you would say, avid hip hop listener, meaning it's the majority of music I listen to, there's a difference between explaining an experience and explaining a reality and selling you a hook that has an emotion attached to it. And this comes down to why hip hop lyricism has been so highly scrutinized. Because, again, when you consider why somebody is depicting violence, you can make your own moral judgment. But if you remove the context, then you begin to create questions and there's a mystery behind what's happening. So for people who aren't necessarily experiencing a lot of these situations, which is going to be a lot of people, especially in American hip hop, most people are not doing the things that are in the violent hip hop songs. So there's a disconnect and there becomes this romanticization. But it doesn't stop because of someone saying, well, I bought a song and I know it's not real, so I'm just going to continue to listen to it because I know it's not real. That's not necessarily true. What that then does, because this music is a product, remember, the music industry sells music. And if the music is violent, or if the music represents something, and that's what sells, meaning that's what we choose to digest, then they will continue to produce it. Now, the only problem that I see with that, because what I just described there was a symbiotic relationship between a customer and a business that has a emotional connection between the two. That's all that is. That's just communication between a customer and a business. The customer's attracted to this thing. The business provides them that for a monetary or emotional transaction, right? But the only problem that I see that runs into this is when the customer is not informed properly or is misinformed by the business, and the business refuses to either inform the customer or the business chooses to misinform the customer. And the reason why that's a problem is because you'll create fake or romanticized music that doesn't necessarily represent what the actual musicians that make that music are representing. So it gets hard for the customer to really know what's happening. And the best way I've learned this, to correlate this to another industry, is the food industry. So for example, if I were to tell you the pyramid of food is incorrect as you've been taught it, initially you may not know what I mean by that and may create some resistance to that information. That would be the same experience as me telling you your favorite tough guy rapper is not tough. So you see what I'm saying? So initially, your first reaction would be, nah, there's no way. I believe them. And then comes the problem. Now you have a manufactured emotion attached to essentially what is a transactional experience between a customer and a business. And that's where the problem gets extrapolated and extrapolated and extrapolated. It's only terrible in hip hop, but you do see this in other genres. This is not the only genre that does this, but it's only bad in hip hop because there's a huge disconnect between the experiences that are happening in violent music and the listeners that consume it, along with the people that create the music not providing the transparency in the difference between experience and depiction. So there's a lot of artists that I could just ring off right now that I could be like, oh, this one has this example of depicting violence in music, and then this artist has an example of just basically saying violent things over music. So there's a huge difference. But the problem is, similar to the food industry, if the customer isn't willing or has readily available access to that level of transparency, the emotion is going to make the transaction happen faster than the knowledge. And it's just a sharp reality we got to deal with. So when it comes down to it, me personally, the way I navigate choosing which music to listen to as far as hip hop comes, I try to listen for more of an experience that's musical than an experience that's I would say emotional. Like, for example, there's some rappers or even other artists that try to create a kind of scary or intimidating or braggadocious feeling, and that can be fine because the music itself may sound nice. But when it comes down to, I'm going to replay this over and over in my daily life and try to like make this song or this album or this artist's experience or art a part of what I would call my lexicon of favorite music, that doesn't happen unless this person is going to be creating some kind of personal experience to it. That it just has to be depicted that way. It doesn't necessarily have to be real. It just has to be artistically depicted that way. And I can tell the difference simply because there's music today that's violent for no reason. Like, just no reason. You have no enemies. There's just no bad times going on in your life. You're just saying these things on music. So it's just, I can hear these things now, and so when I hear it, I'm able to filter it out. But let me know in the comments, what are some examples of songs where you think, yeah, this is just unnecessarily violent. It's just unnecessarily, there's no point to this. It's just because there's songs that kind of corral people together to make you feel good, or corral you together on like a idea. Like Nuck If You Buck is a violent song, but it's essentially just a high energy song. Like if you were to hear like heavy metal music or any other high techno or rave music or something like that, it's just the sounds of it get you riled up. And when you listen to the lyrics, it's not really directed at anything. So then you can make a case for it to be unnecessarily violent. But I don't know. What do you think? Let me know in the comments.